Wald. Perfect. Welcome everyone to getting started with Corpora for language teaching. I'm Margi Wald, and my co-presenter is...
So Keith Folse, we're here in Florida today.
And I'm going to go ahead and let Keith get us started while I help any people who are just coming in to join us for the presentation. So Keith, would you like me to...
Yep, go for it. So here's sort of what we're doing today. So we realize we have a lot of different people here today who are looking to do different things with Corpora. Some people are starting from scratch. That's fine. Other people are, I heard one person already say that he's teaching a class where he's probably teaching teachers or students about how to use some of these things. I myself have most recently taught Corpora not to students, but to future teachers or teachers who are going to have a lot of ESL students in their classes. So I'm trying to find things that are practical and that they would see as very useful and not more busy work for them. So the things that I'm doing today are pretty basic if you know something about corpus, but they're not basic things if you're starting out. They're just sort of bread and butter items. And Margi's going to do things that are a little more advanced, but they're just more, I was saying earlier, they're more extensive. That's all. That you need to know, you need to have some basis with Corpora before you start doing the things that she's going to show. But her ideas are based on what I'm going to do. Okay. So to jump in here, let's go to our next thing. And what is a corpus? I mean, I remember years ago hearing about this in the early 1990s, even when the lexical approach was going to take over the whole field. It didn't take over the field, unfortunately. But what I'm going to do today is talk about how corpus might be useful to teachers and learners. And I'm also, as a bonus, going to introduce you to a short online university course from the UK that I believe is free most of the time. We'll get to that in a minute. So our next slide.
Oops, sorry.
All right. So what is a corpus? So here's the definition that I grabbed. I just went online and grabbed the first thing that I thought that didn't sound like there were that it was a linguist talking to a linguist. So corpus is a term from the field of linguistics and refers to a large set of texts, usually in electronic format, which is considered to be representative of a language or language variety, to be more precise, and is used to analyze it. Corpora provide evidence of how a language is used in real situations. That part about it's considered representative of a language variety is important because people, normal people, teachers, use corpus for a specific purpose. One purpose might be, for example, that I'm teaching intermediate students, intermediate ESL students, and they're in an academic program, or they want to go into an academic program at some point. So they need to be able to function in university lectures. So let's suppose I know that all these students are going to have American history, they're all going to have biology 101, and they're all going to have government 101, or something like that. Those generic gen ed courses that people might take in their freshman or sophomore year. So I can go to a corpus, if somebody has it, a corpus that consists of nothing but university lectures that have been transcribed, even with the ums and the uhs and all of that, because I want people to get used to that kind of speech, right? Not the perfect TOEFL recording kind of speech where everybody speaks in a perfectly correct sentence, puts a period, punctuates things, etc., right? So you can there is a corpus of just academic lectures. There is a corpus of just academic readings. There is a corpus of just TV shows, even soap operas. Okay, why would soap operas be useful? Because if you believe that soap operas are really kind of chit-chatty English, then it might be conversational English. Now, whether it is or isn't, that's a different issue, but that collection would be there for you to search through. All right, so this came from a site called Future Learn, and I'll reference that in a minute. All right, next slide, please. And I'm going to give you an example of a real world problem that happened to me just today. These are 3 slides or 4 slides I just added this afternoon. I wrote Margi frantically saying I've added 4 more slides, make sure you have the right version. So I'm working on this series of textbook, 5 books, very short books on phrasal verbs that come from a corpus that produced a list called the FAVE list, PHAVE. I'll go over that in a minute. So let's go to the next slide, Margi, if you would. Here's my question for you right now. How would you fill in this blank? And there are lots of options here. So look, do something. You really need to blank your grades. So would you type in the chat right now any words that you think would fill in the blank here? It could be 1 word, 2 words, 3 words. I want to see what people are going to type because this became an issue for me today. All right. All right. See, okay, so the idea of improve, it is the idea of improving, or so here's what I want you to do. Can you think of a phrasal verb that would go in this blank? And this is what I did. Margie, can you go up to one slide, just one slide forward? Between these three choices, you as a native speaker. Now, what I'm doing right now is we're doing a corpus search. The corpus consists of your head and all of the experiences that have happened in your life. So I have 65 years of working all over the planet with all these different languages, and my English corpus is kind of messy because I don't know what sounds normal anymore. And if you've taught a bunch of beginning classes for a long time, as I have, your English is kind of shot after a while because you heard all of that ESL. So would bring up work, would pull up work, or would both work? So type in the chat, what do you think? 1, 2, or 3, and any kind of comment you want to make there. So do you see that we're getting not a consistent answer? We're getting some people say only 1. Some people are saying 1 or 2 said only 2, and some people said both. So I don't know what the answer would be, but I need to know because I'm about to put an example in that textbook I showed you earlier, book 3, where the corpus clearly showed that pull up. By the way, the fave list, the PHAVE, what's important is it produced not only a list of the top 150 phrasal verbs, but their meanings. So it's easy to produce a list of a bunch of frequency items. That does nothing to me. A good example I always give is teachers, K-12 teachers often ask me, hey, can you tell me the list of the top 500 words? Sure, I can. One of them is take. So I'll just teach the top 500, and you can teach the top 1,000. Top 1,000 will give you roughly 78% coverage of English. And that's pretty good bang for your buck, that if you teach these 1,000 words, students will be able to, and this is the verb that the speaker uses next is important, the students will be able to recognize, understand, I don't know, recognize 4 out of 5 words, 78%, roughly 80%. Well, that's true, except that the reason a word makes the top frequency of any list is that the word has multiple meanings. And take makes this list because it can be take a shower, take your time, take a bus, take a pill, take this book to office 5, and then all the phrasal verbs that it comes with, take over, take on, take under. So in this case, what I'm trying to say is just because you get a list of the top 100 or 150 items or whatever your magic number happens to be, it's very difficult to turn around and teach that to a person because the most frequent items are polysemous. They have multiple meanings. That's why they made the list. So Margie, go to the next one, the next slide, if you would. So I actually did data. Oh, so you did that. Next one, please. So this is what I found. So I did. I had to go through and search. I searched on Google. I did bring up my grades, bring up your grades, bring up his grades. Now, some of you might say you can put in an asterisk as a wild card. That feature doesn't work in Google. So I had to do bring up my grades, bring up your grades. So you can see, just looking a few, first, this is the base form. Bring, pull, 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 right? With all the possessive adjectives that are possible, all right? And then go to the next slide, Margie, if you would, please. Then I did past tense. You know how long it took me to do this? All right. But you can see the interesting was brought up our grades and pulled up our grades. Evidently, collectively, we're not working very well. I don't know, not a lot of ourness there. And go to the next one, which is the present tense with an S for the he and she. Mark brings up his grades. My gut feeling is this would be in an if clause. If he brings up his grades enough, if he pulls up his grades enough, that's my gut feeling, but I don't know. I didn't do that kind of corpus search. Then I have the INGs. When you total this all together for our next slide, and you find out that bring SEDING, whatever, up, my, your, his, her. So roughly, it tells us this number just tells us frequency. To know the difference between the two in meaning or usage, we need to study the actual corpus. So I had an editor that was trying to tell me, and a co-author also trying to tell me that pull up your grades didn't exist, never heard of it. And I thought, no, I don't know the difference between, I recognize that bring up your grades is a possibility as well. What I think is happening, and this is where people say, well, corpus linguistics can tell us the answer. It can tell you the equivalent of a number. It's a numerical frequency. Doesn't tell you how it's used, why it's used. We don't know if maybe when you're talking about yourself, you use bring, and when it's somebody else, you need pull. Maybe it's a person of authority, like a parent or a teacher talking to a younger kid that they want to scold, will say, you need to pull up your grades. I don't have any of that information, but what I do know is that they both occur. And the difference is roughly about 47% more. I think, this is just me, and I don't have an answer from my co-author and editor yet. I think bring up your grades is the generic one. It's the objective one. It has no nuance to it whatsoever. And to me, pull up your grades is when I'm trying to cajole you more or admonish you more. I don't know, but I'm just saying it exists. And I want to point this out, much to the chagrin of my co-author and editor tonight when I send that email. My point is, this is a real example of corpus linguistics at work. And every time you're at the whiteboard and a student asks you, can you say, or what's the difference between X and Y? They're asking you to do a corpus search in the data of your head. And we don't want to trust only one person, because it might be regional. It might be something that just is a quirk for that one person. And this is what corpus linguistics can help us see, is whether it's used at all or not. So I don't have the answer, but this is an example of a real problem that happened to me today. All right. Thanks, Margie.
And you could, as you say here, you could get more data by looking through each of the individual lines of data that you can get from the corpus, from the concordancer. We'll talk more about that in a minute.
Right. I said, no, it's going to lead right into Margie's talk later. And you'll see that, and this is a situation we would give to teachers sometimes, that would just help teachers see how this could be useful, give them some of these corpus lines and say, here are 20 with pull up and here are 20 with bring up. Do you see any difference? Do you notice, is there something maybe with sociolinguistics is happening? Who's talking to whom, in what kind of situation, etc.
And you can do that as a teacher, but more advanced students, you can actually ask them to do it too.
Exactly. All right. So I mentioned a free course, and this is with a Future Learn. I don't know anything about this company. There are courses that you can buy. This corpus linguistics course, I've taken it twice, free both times. One, if you teach online, you might like to take this course to learn something about corpus, but also to see, in my opinion, how a really well-developed online course looks like, what it looks like, and also to see what a professionally done course looks like. Now, the professors in this course actually have the luxury of having 20 TAs or the equivalent that they can pay to be in the chat groups. So you're carefully monitored, unlike in a college course where there's only one of me and 45 of you, for example, right? But I enjoyed being in it just to see what some of the options were. And I learned some things that I approached my own university with and said, why can't we line up the assignments like this? All right. Thanks, Margie. So a learner dictionary. The first thing I want to show you is a learner dictionary. And what I'm going to show you here is what is a learner dictionary and why do I want to show you this? To me, it's the single best invention that came out of corpus linguistics. So next slide, please. So what is it? So you could have I encourage my students to use a learner's dictionary to look up a new word. I have nothing against bilingual dictionaries. In fact, personally, I would favor a bilingual dictionary if you really want to find out the meaning just like that. But if you want to know something else about the word, for example, the context it might appear in, then I would have them go to a learner's dictionary before I would ever have them go to a regular English dictionary, which to me would be detrimental because it's going to have so much verbiage in it, garbage in it, fluff that's going to be unknown to the students. And again, I work more with lower intermediate, beginning, intermediate students, okay? Learner dictionary, the definitions for any one word are listed by frequency of meaning. So if you have a lazy student, and I'm talking about just regular American students who are native speakers of English who want to consult an English dictionary, when they consult a dictionary, they often grab the very first meaning out of laziness or lack of knowing how to use a dictionary, or both of the previous things I've said. And this corpus linguistics dictionary, the learner dictionary, because it's based on frequency, favors the lazy student in a way. The definitions are written using what the publishers would call a core vocabulary. It's usually 2,000 or 3,000 of the most frequently used words. So therefore, something I tell K-12 teachers all the time, and it applies to adult ESL learners, teachers of adult ESL learners as well. If a student uses a learner dictionary to look up a word and they don't know a word or two in the definition in a learner dictionary, they don't need to ask me, do I need to know this word? I can tell you right now, you need to know that word because they only use high frequency vocabulary. So consulting, looking up words in a learner dictionary is actually a useful skill because it's sort of reading a graded reader in a way, because it's saying what you're reading is at your level or below the 2,000 or 3,000 words. And if you don't know one of the words we've used, you really should know it already. And the examples they give, that's the real plus here. The examples are written using high frequency collocations, the most natural collocations that occur in English. And it's not you or me locked in a room at 2 in the morning trying to write a book. This all comes from science. It's an analysis of English, whether it might be general English, TV English, or transcripts of university classrooms. Thanks, Morgan. So here's an example. I chose the word dozen. I want to show you what this would look like. So when you look up the word dozen, I chose the Britannica dictionary, which used to be, which one was it? I'm drawing American Heritage. Okay. And I believe it was bought out by Britannica. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but this is the one that I usually have people refer to because I like the layout of it. And I haven't seen a lot of fluff in it. I haven't seen a lot of language beyond what students might need. So first of all, you can see it has dozen and it has the plural there and it has 2 options given for you. It also has an option for pronunciation, and this is all free. It's online and available for free. Then it gives you the first meaning, plural, dozen, a group of 12 people or things. And then you have some examples there, a dozen eggs, a dozen roses. And the other collocation that I know from previous research, the top 3 collocations with dozen are eggs, roses or flowers, and bagels or donuts, which they didn't have here because they gave the top 3 examples. If you click on more examples, you might get that. I don't know. Then it goes into the word dozens, which is less common than the word dozen. How do I know that? It's number 2 and not number 1. Now, this might seem kind of silly to you for me to say that, but dictionaries previously, go back 50 plus years, dictionaries used to be written so that the first meaning was based on the etymology of the word, regardless of whether that word was in high frequency usage now. Now, if the meaning were archaic, it would be put toward the bottom. But if it had not been deemed archaic, but still used today, and it was etymologically most related to the original root, that gets the number 1 slot, which really wasn't very good because people weren't using dictionaries not to learn about the etymology of the word, but they wanted to know the meaning of the word when they had just encountered it. So they would have encountered it probably in a more frequently used kind of meaning. But I went through the first definition is most frequent. They have collocations. The second definition, and they give a new usage there. It's by the dozens or in the dozens. I also like it in the collocations. They have the word dozens, takes an of, dozens of people, and then they go to dozens and dozens. And if we are going to use that expression, dozens and dozens, or hundreds and hundreds of people, if you are going to use that kind of repetition, it's going to happen with the dozen with an S and dozen with an S and the OF afterward. All right. Thanks, Margie. Next one. So let's try this. We have the word garden. I want you to imagine as a teacher right now, how would you define the word garden in a classroom? You might draw a picture. You might go get a visual of some kind. But if you had to tell somebody what a garden is, what would you say? Could you type in the chat group really quickly? It's in a 5-level program, it's a level 1 class, maybe a level 2, but it's a beginning student. A garden is, let's see what people say. And this person who asked you this is probably just trying to find a way. They want to keep reading a paragraph, and this word garden popped up. All right, Margie, could you advance the slide one more time? Just once. So here's what a regular dictionary, dictionary.com said. Think about your learner now. a plot of ground. If you stop and look up the word plot, first of all, I'm frustrated now by having to do this. And plot is probably going to say the plot of a story. So it's a story. And then you have ground. I don't know what that means now. Let's look up ground. Usually near a house where flowers, shrubs, not a useful word, vegetables, fruits, and herbs. Herbs, I don't want to know word herb in German when I'm learning level 1, right? So let's see what Britannica did with the same information. An area of ground where plants, such as flowers or vegetables, are grown. Now, just consider vocabulary. The word an area, top 3,000 words, ground, what we're standing on, plants, such as, is that chunk, flowers, vegetables are grown, to grow. They want to know They can't produce the grammar of are grown, but they can probably figure out that this is where these plants, these flowers and vegetables are growing. And they give examples. We planted a small garden in our backyard, and then it says a vegetable garden or a rose garden. Again, look at the Britannica box. I don't know what's the most difficult thing here. Probably you might say grown as a past participle, but grown has grow in it. You can guess that one. And then such as might be new. But such as is a useful chunk to learn because you know such as is going to be repeated many more times in the English language, right? Not like a word like shrub. If I stop and look up the word shrub, I probably will never see shrub again. All right, Margie, let's try another one. So the next word is avoid. Just think in your head, we're not typing the chat. How would you define the word avoid? This is a tough one because it's a verb. It's not a concrete noun anymore. And let's see what Margie, what Merriam-Webster said. To keep away from, shun. Yeah, shun's a high frequency word. They have been avoiding me. Let's go immediately to present perfect progressive. And to prevent the occurrence or effectiveness of, avoid further delays. Okay, that's a good collocation, but now I have to look up the word further, right? And then to refrain from, never going to hear that one again. And then avoid overeating. Avoid overeating might be a good collocation, but this is not user friendly. And then let's see what Britannica did with this, with a tough item. To stay away from someone or something. Now, Merriam-Webster decided to have one definition, A, B, C. Britannica split it into two. To stay away from someone or something. Why do you keep avoiding me? She took a detour to avoid the heavy traffic. Traffic's a good word. Heavy's a good word. Heavy traffic is a good word, a good collocation there. To prevent the occurrence of something bad. See, to prevent's a tough word, but at some point you have to define it in some way. And that's what Merriam-Webster had done. Occurrence, they have the same word there. Something bad, something unpleasant. He tried hard to avoid accidents. We need to avoid further delays. Again, that same collocation, avoid further delays. All right, let's try one more, Margie. Now, I want you to tell me what you think the word is without me telling you the word. Good luck, everybody. So, Margie, be sure to advance on one slide. That's all. So, inclined to or exhibiting assertiveness, hostility, or combativeness. Good luck. Type in the chat group. Let's see if you get it. Are you just copying each other? All right, there we go. Thanks, Jennifer, for putting something. No, there was something. So here's what's all right. See some difference. Now here's an interesting point I can make about context clues. Let's suppose that the word was question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. That's the word right there. And I know the word. The students don't know the word. I described the word. And I described it by using your word because every one of you is correct based on this definition. I'm trying to show you how two ships passing in the night. This is why I'm not a big fan of context clues in general, of relying on context clues for vocabulary growth, and why a teacher can give the best explanation. And it makes all of you are 100% correct so far, but I don't think you have my word. Show the next one, Margie, if you would, please. Angry or aggressive, feeling or showing readiness to fight. Give us the two examples, Margie. Yeah, the word is belligerent. Now, if you go back right now, everybody's word is similar to belligerent. And except in the most extreme context, for example, angry, of all the words I saw earlier, probably the most generic was the word angry, was a good guess. A belligerent remark, an angry remark. If I explain belligerent in my head with angry, it makes sense in this context. And then he was drunk and angry, makes sense. So that's why I favor bilingual dictionaries for people to check what the exact meaning of that word was. You might say this is a one-off. I didn't plan this one. I just grabbed any word I could find last night. Okay. All right, let's try it in the next one here. But all right, Margie. So, question. All right. I mentioned that a learner dictionary also can give you grammar activities, grammar information, such as whether the verb's a transitive verb or not, whether it's count or non-count, and whether it's phrasal verb. I'm going to give you two examples today of show you how students can use a learner dictionary to edit their work. So on the next slide, here's an example of a student error that's pretty common in level 1, level 2. I really like tennis. I enjoy very much. And a teacher who's been trained at a writing center, for example, but doesn't mean writing in the sense of more generic writing and not, or a native speaker who doesn't have ESL background, they might write the following comment. Margie, if you advance that one. So they might say enjoys an intransitive verb if the teacher knows what a transitive verb is. And I'm going out on a limb there because I work with so many beginning teachers these days. But if a teacher knows that and they write that, I always want to cringe when I see that. What does this mean? Why are you using, Chinese to explain Persian to me? I don't speak either of these languages. I don't know why enjoy doesn't work. So let's consult a learner dictionary on our next slide. So when I look at the word enjoy, what I would say is look in the dictionary for a grammar clue. If you really want to go the route of having students do some searching to find out how to correct their own errors, if that's the way you want to go, then writing transitive is not the way to go, to me, not at those beginning and intermediate levels. So what I would do is say, look it up, and it tells you enjoy plus pronunciation and the three forms that exist of the verb. Then it says plus object. That means you have to have an object, also known as a transitive verb, right? And I can't tell you how many native speakers I work with that I'm trained to be future ESL or EFL teachers who don't understand transitive, and that the terminology freaks them out. And it's like we have a meta language to talk about something that we could do much more directly. So what are the examples here? To take pleasure in. Did you enjoy the movie? Relax and enjoy the view. He always enjoys a good laugh. No one enjoys being teased. And then it says this usage note. In speech, enjoy is sometimes used by itself as an informal way of saying that you hope someone will enjoy something. Here is your pie, enjoy. But what you don't say is, here's some tennis, I enjoy, or something like that, right? All right, let's try the next one, Margie. So a student makes this error, pretty common mistake. The student says, so she's a good student, she does her homework. This is one you've seen a million times. And the teacher might write word form. That's useless to an ESL student because what kind of word form? Is it the fact that it's number, singular, plural? Is it the ing on some kind of verb? Word form is like saying mistake, making me search for what kind of mistake is it. You could write error with number, and then I think if I'm not trained in this, then I might think, you mean how many homeworks I had? Is that what the number was? What does it mean? What does number mean? And so let's consult the ESL dictionary. Next slide. Oh, so here's what I want you to do. You look it up. So if you would take this link, and it's just Britannica Dictionary. If you go to Britannica.com and type in dictionary and look that up, all right? Just so everybody has practice accessing this. And see what you see. If you were an ESL learner, what are you going to run into when you get to that page? And Margie, let's go ahead and advance one slide. And when you get there, this is what it looks like. So I've added the pink box and the yellow box to the side, but it says homework plus pronunciation. It only has one form. Remember how we had enjoy, enjoys, enjoyed, enjoying? There's only one form listed. Then it says non-count, work that a student is given to do at home. Please do your homework. Please finish your homework. She started her algebra, grammar, vocabulary homework. All right. So those were two small examples of how a learner dictionary can be useful if you want your students to edit their writing. It's not just about vocabulary. Again, how is this corpus linguistics? Because this dictionary is based on corpus, on a corpus. This is not a bunch of people locked in a room at 2 a.m. trying to figure out 3 examples for the word homework. Next slide, Margie. So you could also have your students use Google. Now, Margie's going to talk about some other databases, some other corpora that are much more corpus designed, if you will. Google is a corpus only in the sense that it's a collection of a bunch of stuff. And we also know that anyone can post anything anywhere on the internet. Hence, just look around you on the internet. And that means that we're going to find out some things that are not correct English. You're going to find a lot of examples of he don't and she don't, and it ain't going to matter. It's all going to exist there. But the numbers, when you actually look at raw numbers, comparing he don't and he doesn't, you're going to see a huge, huge gap. And that's your clue that one is favored over the other. All right, again, there's no way to know whether one is right or wrong until you dig into the things. But if I'm an ESL student and I just want something quick and dirty, go with Google. Let's look at our next slide, Margie. So I want to know I'm a student and I want to write a sentence to describe this photo, and I want to write, I see a dozen of eggs or a dozen eggs. Because dozen here is like a box. I see a box of eggs. Which one could I say? In the chat group, do me a favor. Do you think of is which one is correct? The top one, the bottom one, or are they both possible? What do you think? All right, and I'll admit something to you. I really thought that a dozen eggs only, without the OF, was the only answer. But show next slide, please, Margie. So you get the numbers, and go ahead and advance 2 more slides. It'll give us both numbers, I think. And 1 more, please. So look at the difference in the gap here. So a dozen of eggs does occur, 153,000 results. So today I spent some time going through some of those lines from the corpus, from different corpora actually, and honestly, they were written by native speakers in nice publications. It wasn't that someone wrote an email and posted XYZ. I still think only a dozen eggs is possible, but I saw many examples written by native speakers today in nice publications that had been edited, obviously by the caliber of the journal or the newspaper where I saw it, and that's what I found. So I don't know what the answer is, all right? But this is how I'd go about searching for it. Next slide, Margie. Word lists, and this is why corpus really matters for most teachers. Most teachers know a corpus as a chunk of language, a whole body of language that will produce a list of some kind. So I'm going to discuss 3 lists here. I don't have any activities for you for these lists, but I do have links for you to go to where they have exercises for free for your students. Or if I were teaching a class of future teachers, it's where I would have my teachers go check out these exercises and report back what they felt or noticed when they did the different kinds of exercises. Let's go to the first one, Margie. So the first one, obviously, I say obviously, is the academic word list. The academic word list was not the first word list that dealt with second language learners. The actual first one that I know of, well, there's one before that even, but the first big one, the General Service List from 1953. But the academic word list, April Cox said in 1999, based on her master's thesis research from 1996 and 97, I believe, working with Paul Nation. So it's a list of 570 words that occur frequently in academic language. And you might say, well, gee, that's just her opinion. Well, yes and no, mostly no. Because if you look, April was the person who started this in modern TESOL, I'm going to say, from TESOL 2000 onward. Because, well, I say that because whoever goes first has to decide what your parameters are going to be. And she made some decisions about how to create her list that some people now disagree with. And that's fine to be able to say in retrospect, but her list stuck around forever. I remember someone who's a lot older here that when this list first came out, it was a very hard sell. What do you mean we're going to teach a list? This is so audiolingual-like and traditional. And then 1999, 10 years later, 2010, you couldn't get people not to use the list. And textbooks had to make reference to this list. So I put on here, I'll put on here on this slide at the bottom, a link that has 95 exercises for free that are related to the academic word list there. And then the first link is just the actual word list itself. I will say this as a caveat. The word list can be studied alphabetically, useless. You wouldn't study a dictionary alphabetically, right? You don't look up words alphabetically. But also the list can be accessed 2 ways. First, it's always in the subsets, these 10 subsets. There's subset 1, which is more common than subset 10. But when you get subset 1, it can be listed by what she calls the head word. So for example, there might be a word produce, and produce would give us produce, produces, produce, producing, production, productive, productively, 7 forms. And then one of the lists will give you all 7 forms. The other list will also give you the 7 forms, but it will have at the top or to be underlined the one form that was the most common form, the most frequently occurring form. So I don't know this. I'm going to make this up right now. If product is more common than productive, then I don't want my students learning productive. And you might say, well, Keith, but they should learn them all because it's all good. I want to stop you there. What was the purpose of using the list? What was the purpose in creating the list? To make learning easier for the students by identifying the most frequently used words, not most frequently used words, and any other word you might be able to spell from that word, right? So if we have a list of 570, don't turn it into a list of 3,000, which is what most teachers do by trying to teach and focus on all those forms. It's not a morphology class, okay? It's a vocabulary class, and the purpose was the 570 words, all right? I'll stop preaching at that point. Go to our next slide. Here's the new general service list. This is a newer list, obviously 2013. I really like this list. The list is bigger. It's bigger, but you get more bang for your buck, if you will. There were some people who noted some problems with Abel's list. It was missing some words that were high frequency words. So these researchers in Japan put together the new general service list. And the last one I'm going to mention, next slide, is I mentioned the phrasal verb list, the fave list. And the fave list is this list that's there, Garnier and Schmidt from her dissertation. And here, there's and also 350 exercises that I put in. Next slide, please. I'm going to promo the book a little bit. So these are the books I'm working on. My co-author Kelly Sipple on books 2 and 3, and we're working on 4 and 5 frantically. Once we solve the issue of pull up and bring up your grades, which I'm sure I'll be chastised on later tonight. Okay, despite the evidence that I'm trying to show these two. All right. So Margie, I'll turn it over to you. I think that's the end of my part. Oh, sorry. And there are also for the books, there are free online exercises. So even if you didn't buy the book, pass those links on to your students. And this is using Quizlet. So each one of these has 5 exercises plus artificial intelligence teaching you the 5 words. I make no claim whether it's good or bad, just that it's artificial and intelligent. There you go.
Okay. Thank you, Keith, for all that. I know that people might have questions. We're going to try to, because of the time, we're going to try to keep going, and then we'll go ahead and take some questions at the end. I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of different things that you can use based on some of the things that Keith said, and maybe taking it kind of one step farther, further in class, or preferably, depending on the level of your students, you do it before class and then share it with your students in class. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, and many of you might know what this is already, but these are vocabulary profilers, and actually show you 2. One that show you kind of how difficult a text is, and then finding kind of which words you might want to teach. So you can copy and paste text into a profiler to check that text vocabulary level. And it'll give you information on which list a word is part of, so that it can show you how difficult a word might be. The first one I'm going to show you is the the vocabulary profiler, which looks at these levels, right? The first 1,000 most frequent words, the second 1,000 frequent words, the academic word list. You can also look for the new general word list and the new academic word list, those things Keith was just talking about. COCA will talk, which is the Corpus of Contemporary American English. We're also going to look at that, and it'll show you what it calls high, mid, and low frequency words in a text. And that's based strictly on the words that are in this particular corpus. Okay, that's pretty abstract. I'm going to try to get less abstract here. So if you want, you can go and take a look at the profiler. I'm going to show you a couple of slides, and then we're going to go and actually go to the profiler, and I'll show you how it works. So this is, there are many different versions of this. This is the one I like because it's clean. It's easy for students to follow. You'll see you can pick the list that you want to do. The general service lists and academic word list is where it defaults, but it does have the new list in there, and you can pick some other lists as well. And I'm going to take this sample text. You don't need to read this, don't worry. It's just a text that I pulled from what's considered kind of a low intermediate to intermediate website. And we're going to use this today with the activities that I'm going to show you. So let's do it, right? So can you see this? Are you seeing the vocabulary profiler now? Okay, I've already copied and pasted the text into this box, and I'm just going to hit submit. And you'll see that it comes up with a data table, and I'll talk you through these in a minute, a data table. And this data table is going to tell you how many words in the total number of words in the text, what list they're on. right? And I know this is really small, so I'll do it a little bit bigger in a second. It's also going to show you these word lists. So it's going to show you the actual words that are on these different word lists. So you can see, just by looking at this, I can see, okay, most of the words are in the first 2K. That actually is good. That means my intermediate students might be okay doing this. Or if there's some words on these that they don't know, they probably should. So let's go ahead and take care of that, right? And then it also will highlight the text for you. And you can actually change these colors if you want. This is maybe a little bit hard to tell, but the words that are in blue are in the first 2K, and then the academic word list words are, the harder words are in this kind of orangey tan, and the other academic word lists are in this, but again, you can change those colors. So I'm going to jump back to the slides for a second and talk you through some of the stuff that we just saw. Right, so you might know that the number of words that you need in order to guess a word's meaning from context is 95 to 98% of the words. Is that correct, Keith? I got that right?
Yeah, it's a very high number. Hey, Margie, can I add one more thing? Notice that what I was saying earlier, notice that I said 78%, that's the magic number. And this text that Margie chose got the first 1,000 at 79.8.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to me that no matter what you put in, you roughly get this as long as the text is big enough. So thanks.
And this, this wasn't a super long text, but you'll see that just, they're going to get this much, but that's still not 95 to 98%. And you'll see even with those academic word list words, right, we're still just at 90%. So there are these off list words, which I'll show you in a second, and you're probably going to need to do something with those. Whoops. So, right, it looks to be intermediate, but you might want to gloss some of these words, right? Or you might want to make sure that you teach them, because if you're doing a whole unit on food, they might come up again, right? But this lets you know, like, is this going to be approachable for the students? And then what do I need to make sure that I focus on that they may not know? I mean, they might very well know some of these words given their backgrounds, but maybe not. So this gives you, and are they ever going to need the word sucrose? Yeah, right. They need to know what it is. Sugar, right? A kind of sugar, right? In the unit that we were doing, I think we ended up talking a lot about high fructose corn syrup, because that was more interesting for the particular unit. And that was going to be the thing that was listed on the packages that they buy at the store. So it seemed more relevant, right? And again, I just changed the color so it was a little easier to see here. This is the highlighted text. So that is the vocabulary profiler, and it's just analyzing the text to help you understand where you might go in class. You can also, though, have students put their own writing into the vocabulary profiler. It's another way for them to kind of get an understanding of their own vocabulary and the number of words that they're using and the level of those words. And it's not like you should tell them they need to get to whatever percentage, like your academic word list word should be 12% by the end of the semester. But it would be interesting to see if the number goes up from an early draft to a later draft of a paper or something like that. Okay. For those of you who've never used the Corpus of Contemporary American English, here's the link for you. It's in the slides that maybe you've downloaded. You're going to need to log in. Well, actually, this should be the other way around. First, you need to register if you haven't already. Then you're going to need to log in. I've already logged in, so I'll show you in a second how to do this. There's a feature on COCA called the Text Analyzer, which allows you to do the same thing that we just did with a vocabulary profiler, only it's using the Corpus of Contemporary American English. So I've clicked on this button. You get a similar kind of slot box like this, and you just click Analyze Text. And I know this is really small. I'm going to show it a little bit bigger in a second, right? But you see, we get a similar type of thing. Here is the text, and in this case, it's the frequency range. And this is just the information that's in this particular corpus, sort of like the Google example that Keith was giving earlier, right? So you see like, okay, only 12% is in that really pretty high range. And you'll see we get these low frequency words, and it's going to give us kind of the more frequent to less frequent, et cetera, right? So you've got all these great words that you can play around with and decide, okay, what do I need to teach in class? Okay, I'm going pretty quickly because we went a little bit over on the last one. So, right. So you paste your text here, you click Analyze Text, and then you get these results. And this is just the same thing, a little bit bigger. Okay. So what do we do with all these words? Right. I've just given you a ton, you know, these great, you're getting all these great lists of words out of your article. And now you need to think, okay, what am I going to do? And so we're going to look a little bit at word and grammar collocations, words that tend to go together, or the grammar that tends to go together with particular words, so that we can help students learn how to use the words. Or as I say, what are we going to do with all these words? So I'm going to go back to the Learner's Dictionary. This is the one I chose for today. There are many. I saw there was another one. Somebody mentioned Oxford in the chat earlier. The nice thing, as Keith said, about these learner dictionaries is look at all this yummy grammar, as I call it, that we get here with recommend, right? So all the students who say recommend me, right, or write recommend me, that's no, actually. And we get a lot of information here about how what you can, what grammar you can use. And then we get some good examples for each one to help the students see the meaning of the word and the grammar that goes along with it. For those of you who are at home, I don't have a slide of this today, but you can scroll down and you'll see a lot of other things. I'm going to show you for a couple of other words in just a minute. So, right, let's look at two. Okay, so I took two other words from our list. Here's demand, right? And we get supply and demand. We get singular, uncountable, as Keith had mentioned earlier. They can hear the word being spoken, right? We get different meanings for the word. Then we get demand for, demand that, popular demand. But then I kept scrolling down and look at all this great stuff I found here, right? We get adjectives and the noun, we get verbs and the noun, we get phrases, right? So this learner dictionary, Longman especially, just gives you I'm just going to say a ton of information. Dozens and dozens of examples, to use Keith's line from earlier, right? Same thing with cause, and they have it for recommended as well, but cause something for somebody, cause concern, cause somebody problems, cause somebody to do something. And we get all this additional information. Look at all this great stuff. Cause a problem, cause trouble, cause damage, cause a disease. And you're like, yeah, those all sound great. Would I have been able to think of all these by myself? No. Aren't we happy that this dictionary is here to do it for us? Okay, just a few more things, because I know we're just piling on information here, right? The last thing I want to show you is that what's really nice about this COCA example, this COCA feature, is that once you get this list or this list, you can click on any of the words and it'll take you to an overview of that word. So let me see if I can find the right thing. There we go, right? And if I go to recommend, it's going to pull up. I just clicked on recommend and look at all this great stuff that I get, right? We get topics that it's generally used with. We can see how much it's used in the academic English versus spoken in magazines. We get some collocations right here, right? We get nice little clusters down here. It is recommended. I would highly recommend, right? So you see, and these dots are telling you like how many words are in the cluster, right? So all I did to get this was I just went to here and I clicked on a word, right? So you can do it for all the words, right? and it takes you to this information where it's essentially done a lot of this work that the collocations dictionary does. It's just looking at the information as it plays out in the corpus that we have here with COCA. Okay, so there's your recommend. I put at the end here, because I know we're like 4 minutes away from the end, one more piece of data. Students need 7 to 10 passes at a word. That means seeing it, hearing it, using it, doing something with it, or potentially more, and within a pretty narrow band of time in order for that intake to become uptake, if you will, in order for the students to be able to remember. So I've put together here just a set of sample tasks that you might do to give students these passes at the word. So the first that I list here is a vocabulary. I use Notebook because I do it electronically now. It used to be that we'd actually do a notebook, right? With a, you can make screenshots of those things that I just showed you from COCA, right? Or you can have people look in learners' dictionaries and they can pile the information. I do a Google sheet and the word gets a row, and then we have some columns of like collocations and grammar and examples and so on. And then we just fill out that row, or I will upload a screenshot, right? You can actually ask students to look in the learner's dictionary to compile some information about the word if you think that they're advanced enough to do that. You can provide students with possible collocations or sentence completions. Students match which are appropriate. I'm going to give you some examples of these in a minute. Students, you can provide them with lists of possible collocations, and they, again, with multiple choice kind of an idea. And you can actually do some error analysis based on some of the things that you've been highlighting about a word. So here are some examples, right? Which 3 go together with the verb according to COCA browse, right? So that screenshot that we took. So completely recommend. Students really like that, but actually it's not very common, right? I completely recommend, right? Highly, yes. Incredibly, right? Strongly, yes. Routinely, yes. So those were the ones that were on the list there, right? Doctors recommend, okay, which grammar is okay here? Which one's wrong? You get extra credit here, right? Which one is wrong? Take a second. It's the last one, which students love to write, but it's not actually correct according to English, to academic English grammar. Okay, here's one where it's like, look at these sentences from your podcast scripts on eating a healthy diet. So students were doing a little podcast. Help your classmates by correcting any errors. And you can just give them the sentences from the scripts. You can highlight the parts that have the issues, right? So healthy, so healthier, and it's an IER, that rule recommends you avoid these, and recommend that you avoid these items, or recommend avoiding these items. Packed with, right? Processed food. And I always give a shout out. This group actually got unhealthy ingredients, fresh ingredients, high fructose corn syrup, trans fat, and avoid. All of those were part of our target vocabulary as well. Right? Dictionary practice, right? This, I'm sorry, I stole this. Hello, Jan, I see you there. I stole this from a textbook that Jan and I worked on, right? Here is just from the Oxford Dictionary, an entry about interrogate. It wasn't on that. Sorry, ran out of time this morning, so I stole it. And then you can ask them a bunch of questions about the entry in order to get them to learn how to plow through all the information that's provided, and help them think, learn how to use the dictionary, and also learn about the word itself that you're talking about. Right? Few more sample tasks and then I'm done. Some writing or speaking practice. Ask students to use one of the verbs. I work a lot with verbs with students, right? Use a verb when writing 1 to 2 sentences that summarize a text. So I might, we have a new reading for today, and my accountability quiz, did they read the writing for today? Did they read the reading for today? I tell them 2 verbs that we talked about last time, or 2 verbs that I asked them to look up in the reading, and then they have to summarize the text using those 2 words. Just 1 to 2 sentences, nothing big, quick start, gets them focused on the reading that they did for the day, good practice with the vocabulary, and you can maybe tell if they actually read it. You can also highlight passages together in class and ask students to paraphrase using the vocabulary. You can give them sentences that need to be completed with information from the text, always using that vocabulary. Or again, write 2 sentences and ask them to combine them. So I put a couple of examples here. In organic food, the author notes several recommendations, lists 2 that you might use in your speech. Doctors highly recommend, and then they have to use the ing, right? Doing something, what do they recommend? It is also strongly recommended that, and then they have to finish, right? Same thing, combine the sentences. So doctors recommend this, and then I'm going to give them stuff. So doctors recommend avoiding sugary food, right? Or consumers demand that companies favor, not that they're going to come up with that word, quality over profits. That was one of the things in the reading that we did. Or you can take a number of sentences that the students wrote that are short and choppy about that, and ask them to put it together and give them some of the words that you're trying to use. So doctors recommend that you should avoid processed food because they contain high fructose syrup and salt, right? We're trying to get them to put it all together, right? And that's my very quick, sorry, because we ran a little over. I'm sorry that was so quick, but I hope that the slides will help you with all of this. Okay. 303, pretty good.
Great job.
I haven't been following the chat, I'm sorry. Yes, the link to the slides, I'm sorry. I will do that again. Hold on just a second. And now we have time for questions, comments. You can practice some things if you want, whatever you all would like to do. Uh-oh. The Google's, one of the, Keith, one of the links to the 25 says it's not safe.
Okay, well,
I'll go, we can go look that up. Right?
I'll look it up. I'll just send it to you, and when we can post that to fix that. Let's see.
Okay. Yeah, I'll fix it in the slides, and then I'll re-upload the slides for you.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I went very, very quickly there, and I do want to give a shout out to Jan. Yes, the length and complexity of the sentences in a text is an issue, of course. That's not what our focus was today, but yes, very much so. So we're not just, vocabulary is one thing that you're going to look at. And so it's not the only thing that you're going to look at to decide what text you should or should not teach. But once you have that vocabulary, it does help you. These profilers will help you decide, what vocabulary you might want to teach, or what, if depending on the level of the students, and if they're ever going to read anything again about this topic, what you might just lose. So thank you, Marianne, very good question. And just because I couldn't help myself, I put a couple of links here to, I'll add those. I'll re-upload the slides and send out the link to everyone. At the last minute, I realized that we should use some shameless self-promotion, so I put a couple of links into some books. Okay.
Good books, not just some books, some good books.
Good book. Right. So we're happy to stick around to answer questions. And we're also happy to kind of take you through some things if you've got some texts that you're working with and you want to play around with them. We're happy to work with you. Anyone have any questions?
I do. So this is Michelle Pletz, and Keith, you and I worked a little bit with in Sunshine State TESOL with Cynthia Schumann and so forth. So that's how we know each other.
Right.
Um,
I remember you for sure.
yeah, so I'm now in the Atlanta area and I'm working at a college and career academy. And in the parlance of the public schools, I push into classes as diverse as culinary arts to dental science to auto tech, criminal investigations, and so on. So I'm still using Lex Tutor to do my word analysis, my vocabulary analysis. And I was recently introduced to the EAP Foundation site, but one of the things I noticed about it is that it doesn't go past that 10,000 band.
Mhm.
And occasionally, in fact, quite a bit for the dental science class, I'll come across something that goes, beyond that 10K band, but it's still a useful word for the students to know. And the example that comes to mind right now is, believe it or not, I saw hand washing, pretty far out there. I can't remember what band it appeared in.
Mhm.
So I guess my question is are people still using Lex Tutor? Is EAP Foundation an appropriate tool for these technical fields? Do you have another idea of a better tool to use?
Well, what you mentioned, the example of hand washing is interesting because Kelly Sipple and I, in writing these books, our editor will say you should, the European, the common European framework of reference, the A1, just for the 6 levels, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So we're aiming some of these books mostly at A2, B1, somewhere in there. And the editor will say something like, well, this dialogue, they all have an opening dialogue. This opening dialogue has a word in it that doesn't appear, it's not in any of the, it's off the band, off the CEFR chart, the CEFR chart. And it's a word like hand washing, where there's a hand and a washing. And yeah, hand washing didn't appear there because it's a compound word. Not every word can be taken into account. So for me, some of it's just kind of common sense at some point where words pop up and I think, gosh, seriously, like Margie, one of your slides had the word vegetables was in the off list, and I thought, seriously, vegetables, but fruit made it. All right, and I started thinking, well, why would that happen? The fruit of your labor. We don't have the vegetable of your labor. Okay, maybe that's what's happened. And maybe that's why it made it, right? Or to bring to fruition. And if they had fruition, they would go, well, fruition comes from fruit. We have to teach fruit now. All right, now it's covered. But I take all of these as just guidelines, especially the CEFR. When they tell me that hard, for example, I'll make this up. Hard has 2 meanings, not one meaning difficult, one meaning not soft, right? So when they'll say, well, when it means not soft, that's actually A1, and when it's difficult, then it's B1. How do you know that? How does anyone know that, really? Okay, I'm drawing a blank. Michael Swan has the best sort of tongue-in-cheek, but pretty direct response. If you know his sense of humor, and to shoot these things down as to who's deciding these levels and things like that. So I take them as guidelines, Michelle. That's it. I will say this: if you're dealing with dental students or that profession at that level, you're going to have massive off the list kind of words. But they're off the list only because the corpus that you're consulting wasn't based on that material. Had it been based on that material, then a word like cavity, I don't know many dental words, cavity would have occurred high frequency in a corpus of dental work, right? But it's not when you're looking at the TV corpora or some corpus or something like that. I just think they're guidance. Margie, do you know of a better? I don't have anything else that would be better.
No, all I can suggest is that you look to see if there are, if you're doing serious English for specific purposes, you really do need to see if there are lists for that particular subject area. I know Averill Cox said, what was Averill working on? Something with construction workers or?
Yeah, I've read that project.
Right, so there are more and more lists that are being compiled. And obviously the more specific that list, I can look and see, and I'll add it to the slides. I did once find for my students, and I'll see if I can find it again, a list of kind of in various disciplines, some corpora that are available to them. So I can look for that. But that's really kind of, this was just a super introductory glance at corpus stuff. This really was about getting your feet wet. And then, yes, Randy, that was my next idea, is to take all the text that you're using. We actually have on the CIRT-IG website, Nicole Remercer did a workshop on how to create a corpus using your own texts from the class, and then using that to create assignments. So what ANCONC will do, as Randy wrote in the chat, will allow you to take various texts. You have to, it's a little, technically, you've got to take the texts and change them into text files, but he's got a converter that works really well with the ANCONC interface. And you can create, if you get enough texts from your field, and maybe doing some additional searches and getting more texts from the library or from, Realia or what have you, then you can create your own corpus. And that then you'll get things that are more discipline specific. I don't know how you can check to make sure that your corpus is really inclusive of everything. And that's why it's nice to try to find ones that have been produced that are what we call principled. But even just taking all the texts from various classes that students are taking, that's what I do, is like, okay, bring in all your texts from all the things that you're studying, and let's make a big corpus out of them and use those, right? And thank you.
I'll add something else here. Michelle, there are so many lists that are out there now. There was Abel's list. Then people wanted to do sort of one-upsmanship or make it better, and they did those kind of things. And it's gotten now into the list for plumbers, the list for pilots, and a lot of professors who are in assistant professor slots trying to get published in a journal have realized that corpus linguistics doesn't require you to use human beings. It's a little easier in that sense only if you know what you're doing. So I've seen so many publications of different lists. I say this because I wrote a small book for the University of Michigan Press as an ebook, an EPUB, on lists in general, like which one was the best list in my opinion, etc. And I was shocked at how many I saw there. Also, a grad student and I did a publication for MEX-TESOL years ago. So if you just Google my name and MEX-TESOL, that will pop up for free. And we listed journals. I mean, we listed lists in our list of lists, if you will. And it was shocking how many things were already there. So I can only imagine, and I'm 100% sure based on what Margie said and other things I've seen, I follow up. I don't read the articles, but I say, oh, someone published a list on that. Well, it's a list. How good the list is or isn't, I don't know. But I'll also add, because these lists are technical words, these are not going to be polysemous words. These words are going to have one meaning, and that's it. So surgery is surgery. Surgical is surgical, right? Bacteria is bacteria. So when you get those kind of words, that is the kind of list that you could turn around and give to someone and say, look these words up. Because I don't need to, because there aren't going to be 5 meanings for you to guess which one's the most common. I don't think I'm going out on a limb there based on the words being that technical.
Thank you. Yeah, I've run across a list for carpenters and another list for, I have found just the other day a list for dentistry. So I'm on the case.
Way to go.
Anybody else have any questions or want to practice anything or work through anything? Thanks, Patrick. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Well, congratulations, all of you. You got my onslaught of 30 minutes worth of slides in 17 minutes. Thank you for your patience and tenacity. And thanks to Keith for joining us for this event. And I'm going to stop the recording.